if I walk into a barn and the horses are agitated, or even I walk onto the property and the horses are agitated, I don't really need to know a whole lot more from the humans because the horses are already telling me.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Reinforce the Horse. Today we are here with Lisa Murrell, and Lisa is the founding partner of Equine Alchemy and MetaSystem Integrated Strategies. She has spent the last 20 years working globally to help her clients achieve breakthrough results in business development and team executive coaching. Lisa has developed the only International Coach Federation approved coach training program through working with horses, which utilizes her extensive experience in both coaching and business development with horse wisdom. Lisa's work in executive and team coaching, life coaching with and without horses, and leadership development with horses are guides for integrating the wisdom of horses into personal and professional transformation. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I'm good. Every time I hear you say that introduction, I think, oh, it sounds pretty professional.
It sounds very professional.
Yeah, so I'm really happy to be here. I am looking forward to talking about horses, which is my favorite thing to do anyway.
Wonderful. Well, can we start? I want to ask where your horsemanship journey began.
I was raised in eastern New Mexico, West Texas, on a farm, and my dad had cutting horses. And although he wouldn't let me ride his cutting horses because he never thought I could ride very well. But I did. I rode all the time bareback as a little kid, just everywhere. And then when like so many people do, I finished high school and then moved away. And so I lived in Europe for quite a while and in New York City and all over the world. And every time I could, I'd find a horse that I could ride. And it was wonderful. It was really wonderful to do that. And then finally, when my daughter was, I guess she was like 13, 12. Anyway, she got into horses. And then the whole journey started again.
Wow, that's lovely. So, when did you get your first horse that was yours?
Not until I was, let's see, how old was I then? I was probably like 48 or 49. That was my horse. I had gotten horses for my daughter, and I rode my father's horses when I was little, but I didn't get to have my own horse till later. And we were together for 10 years. He was a Dutch warm blood, and I went to Holland, and I tried out in 3 days like 20 horses. I really liked this one, and so I had him flown back, and we were together for 10 years. We did eventing, and it was really amazing. And then he passed about 4 years ago. He had a broken leg, so I have another one now. So we're still continuing.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear about his passing, but it sounds like you're on a pretty incredible journey with the horses that you have on the property and with your business. Can you tell us a little bit more about your business and your practice?
Yeah. Well, I was a consultant and a business consultant for years. And so I learned all of these amazing skills and worked all over the world. And then I realized I was getting very burned out. So I started going to study with different people who had horses. One was Linda Kohanov here in Arizona. And I realized that my life would never be the same when I got back to the horses. And so I built a career around it. And that was like 17 or 18 years ago. And so I tried to, as I tell all of my students, you have your own specific gifts. And how can you use those gifts, integrate those gifts with whatever the horses have to teach you or whatever you're doing with the horses. And so that's kind of how I ended up doing the coach training, life coach training and executive coach training with the horses, because that's what I knew how to do. And I just thought, after I'd met the horses and had my life changed by them again, I realized that I was a much better coach and consultant as a result of having been immersed in this horse wisdom, I call it, or just learning the lessons from horses. And so that's when I said, I've got to bring this to other people. They have to be able to understand that the horses have so much to teach us. And so I became kind of like a conduit for them, how to make sense in their minds, other people's, of what their experience with the horses actually is. So that's like the Cliff Notes version of that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And can you tell us more about ICF? I'm a little familiar with it, and I know it's a pretty detailed process to become a coach in that way. But you're saying that you have like an ICF approved equine coaching program. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, just so people know what ICF is, it's the International Coach Federation. And to give people a little perspective, therapeutic work with horses is done by mental health professionals. So it's licensed. And so it's regulated on a lot of different levels. And then life coaching is not licensed. So basically anybody can hang out a shingle and say, I'm a coach. But the International Coach Federation has been around since probably 1998. And it is the platinum standard for coaching globally. So if you have that accreditation or approval, then people know that the quality and the standards are there. So that's life coaching. I mean, coaching's version of a license, if you will. And so when I had been working with the horses, when I went back to them again around 2005 or 6, like I said, this is so amazing to be able to learn and to basically what was happening is I was listening instead of talking, which is probably the biggest difference between consulting and coaching. Coaching is about listening to the horses. And I know there's so many things here. Hold on just a second. Sometimes I have a traffic jam in my mind. Oh, right. So my whole big forte was coaching and consulting. And so I said, I want to share this with people. I want to share that there's another dimension of coaching, another level of consciousness and awareness that can be combined with coaching to better serve all of the clients that want to have coaches. And so I said, okay, I'm going to create this program. And I think for at least 3 years, people said it can't be done. It's too complex. There's too many things, all the naysayers. Well, that never did work very well for me. And so I just kept creating this program. And so I was first approved and accredited for the program in 2010. And there, to this day, is still nobody else in the entire world that has this approval and accreditation for learning how to be a coach through working with horses.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit more about the kind of work you do and how the horses aid you in it?
Yeah, like I said, I feel like everything that I do is an adventure in awareness. And I feel that, again, listening is so important. So the thing about horses, and I'm sure people who are listening to this and you too know so clearly that the reactions of the horses to whatever we're doing is pretty clear. If you just look, I always say to people, if you want to know what's happening, just take a look at the horses. They will tell you what's really happening. For example, if I walk into a barn and the horses are agitated, or even I walk onto the property and the horses are agitated, I don't really need to know a whole lot more from the humans, because the horses are already telling me what the, if you will allow me, the energy is. So, I like one of my workshops, and I'm having one the 1st through the 3rd of June, as well as throughout the fall, is called Moving Beyond Your Limiting Beliefs. So the premise here is that we see our lives through a certain lens, and we need a shift in perspective. And who better to give us a shift in perspective than a horse whose sensitivity and ability to assess what's going on in the environment, discern whether they need to do anything about it, do it, and then go back to grazing, is unlike any other animals, at least that I know of and I have worked with. So we call that emotional agility. And so if people can recognize through working with the horse and how the horse responds to that person, if they can recognize that if they would just shift a little bit in their perspective, then a whole other view of themselves and their situation can open up.
Yeah, I totally agree. Horses are such energetic mirrors of our souls. And it's, I mean, yes, they do mirror our forward uh, emotions and feelings, but it's like they're feeling and showing our soul, which is, I believe, how come they make such wonderful teachers and coaches. And it's quite fascinating that they partner with you in this way and help you figure out how to help coach your clients.
Yeah, definitely. I say that there's a partnership, and I don't feel like the human is the better part of the partnership. The horses are. What happens is, say, for example, if I have an enclosed area, like a round pen or something like that, and there's a horse in at liberty inside, and I help someone kind of, my wish is to help prepare them so they can see what it's like to be with another sentient being from their heart or from their soul, as you were saying, rather than thinking about it. So there's this exercise or experience that is called heart's desire. And basically, people start thinking about what their heart's desire is, which I say, if you're thinking about what it is, you're in your head, you're not in your heart. So being able to get to the same place as the horses already are, we do a lot of preparation, like body scans and breathing and sometimes sound healings and qigong, just to kind of regulate human energy so that we are not our so that we can match the horse's energy where they are, instead of actually trying or forcing them to match our energy, which I think unfortunately happens too often. And then from that place, if you're in a calmer state, you have some skills, some tools for, well, how do I stay in this calm state? Well, do I feel my feet on the ground? Am I aware of my surroundings? How's my breath? How's my heart? Because, as you know, the horses can sense just subtle shifts in blood pressure and heart rate. And most of us humans are running around just kind of stamping all over the place, not aware of any of these things. And that horses are really refined at that because of their survival. And so people learn a lot about listening to themselves, about being able, there's this big term, mindfulness. Well, yeah, it is. But I feel like it's more of, begins with mindfulness, but it's more of an embodiment. How can they pay attention to their body? And that's what the horse is responding to. So go ahead.
Yeah, most definitely. And I love the name of your website, Equine Alchemy. And so alchemy is one of the topics that Alyssa and I have been talking about, quite a bit recently. And it comes from, all different whatever modality you want to choose. Our particular one at the moment is yoga, so we're pretty knee deep into yoga
Mm,
practices, and of course ancient Vedic texts and stuff talk about the elements and alchemy. And can you tell us more about like your process from an alchemical perspective and what you're actually getting at with the term alchemy and your work with horses and people?
mm, it's a beautiful question. I feel, uh, I guess the best way to start is I do a lot of work with trauma, and trauma lives in the body. You can't get rid of it. It's just there, but there are ways for you to heal your trauma through certain things that trauma specialists and therapists do. And the horses are particularly helpful in that. So I say, preface with that, but when I first started doing this work again back in 2005, and I said, my life will never be the same. I will have these horses in my life forever. I didn't really understand what had happened, the alchemy that had taken place. For years, I don't think it might have been 10 or 11 years before I actually recognized or understood what had happened through my own journey in trauma healing. And there's this concept of co-regulation and self-regulation. Have you heard of either one of those?
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah, well, I hadn't. I did not know what it was. But what had happened is, as a result of many people not having parents who knew how to co-regulate, because they didn't have parents who knew how to co-regulate, we didn't really learn how to self-regulate or self-soothe, because you can't learn that by yourself. You learn it from someone else. I mean, look at the horses and their offspring. They're running around with their mom and or broodmare, and they're all learning everything from each other. And that is the role of the mom to help that little being learn how to be on its own. And it's a very energetic thing, especially with the horses. And the life of humans doesn't always follow that as much as it could. And so here we are looking at all of these external aspects of our life, expecting it to help us to feel safe when we don't know how to self-soothe or make ourselves feel safe because we didn't learn how. And co-regulation is the help of someone else who's holding the space for and nurturing that journey of finding safety within yourself. And that is what that horse did for me back in 2005. It was, that was the alchemy of actually moving from complete dependence to everything on the outside to help me feel safe, or dependence of any kind of addictions or things that we use outside to self-soothe, for me to find a way to feel okay myself. And all of this was nonverbal. All I can say I just kept saying I was a different person. And then I realized over the years that that's what had happened. I was, that horse held the space for me to feel that part of myself, which was not broken. Let me say that. And yeah.
What was the process that you went through to actually develop that sort of relationship with the horse in the first place? I mean, you talk about kind of growing up and riding and looking for horses to ride as you traveled and lived around the world. But ultimately, what drew you into that desire to have that relationship?
I don't think anything was conscious about it as a kid. I mean, if you're a kid and you grow up on a farm, you work hard, there's some horses, and that's kind of like what it was. Because I didn't have a horse of my own, these were all ranch horses. And I didn't have the opportunity or awareness of wanting a connection with the horses. So I know there's a lot of wonderful stories about how kids grow so much from that connection and that relationship. In fact, I know so many adults who say, "Oh, I'm much better with horses than people." And I don't know that I was like that. It wasn't until let me tell you a story. This is how this happened. This is how this unfolded, this particular instance that I'm talking about. Back in 2005, we were in a round pen, and there was this beautiful, big 17-hand thoroughbred named Kali. And we were in there together. He was at Liberty, and my task was to ask him to move in one direction. Could be, I didn't at that point even know whether I was supposed to make him walk, trot, or canter, or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, I couldn't get him to do anything. Nothing. In fact, I tried to actually move this horse by pushing him. I was so unconscious and unaware at this time of how I just responded to situations. At this point, I had been consulting with worldwide leaders on their businesses, their lives, their organizations, everything. So I had been in like the deep end of the pool for quite a while, but I couldn't get this horse to move. And what I recognized is, much to my horror, I felt like, which had obviously been one of my fears, is that I was a fraud. You know, all these people paid me whatever amount of money they paid me to help fix everything and make everything good, and I couldn't do this. So it was a very vulnerable and humble place to be, but it took a while to get there. And I mean, I'm talking, this happened like 2 or 3 minutes, all of this breakdown. And that is what had to happen. I had to break down the walls of fear, the fear that I was broken, the fear there was something wrong with me, the fear that everybody knew that I didn't deserve anything. All of those really intense messages that I had grown up with and developed. I was reduced to a puddle of tears, to say the least. And at that moment, that's when Kali came over to me. And that's when we began our relationship, because I'd cleared out all the gunk, so to speak, all these limiting beliefs that I had about myself, just who I thought I was and who I didn't think I was. And finally, I got down to who I really am. And that's when Kali could connect with me. And I had never had a connection through that with any human that I could remember. And then I asked him to move, a walk and a trot, turn, walk, trot the other way. And believe me, I was not a proficient Liberty lunger. But it was as though we were so aligned. And it's like that co-regulation. Finally, I felt completely and totally accepted, completely unconditionally accepted. If I was just brave enough to be me, whatever that was. I didn't even have to say what it was. So that was that little story for me.
That's That's beautiful. And I can relate to that in many different ways. Getting into horses, I had a difficult time being confident and rather brave enough to ask anything of them. And there's something profound to say about when you get to a point where your system is like beating itself down to a point where it causes breakdown or tears or whatever, and the horses are like, that's what you needed to release. And they have this sense of like knowing and tuning into our heart space, literally. And goodness, that whole journey with Kali totally resonates with me in so many ways. And to hear about how your journey began to unfold from that moment is incredible. So did this horse did he help you start Equine Alchemy?
No, actually, my horse back in New York, because I came out here to study. It was like a year-long apprenticeship, and I lived in New York, a couple of hours north of New York City, and I had horses. And so that horse, Simon, another great big thoroughbred, he's the one. He was the founder. When I say co-founder, that's because I founded it with him. And he really taught me so much, because I had to retire him early, like when he was only 14, because of a sesamoid injury. And he and I had only been competitors. We'd only been performers all our lives, and we didn't know how to just be. We did not know how to just be. And so it was a struggle. And it's through that relationship with him, I think, that I realized, this is going to be a little bit harder than I thought. And so it started from there. And then I just invited other horses into it. And then I started studying so much. There's so much science behind, there's the mystical connection with horses. And then they're part of our history. And then there's a whole piece of work around what's actually happening with their electromagnetic field and our electromagnetic field. And so I was able to, as a result of all the great work that's been done, delve into, well, what's actually happening? How come horses? People ask me all the time, what is actually going on? And how do they know? And how can they mirror? Because people had used those words, mirror, a lot. But that's a psychological term that a lot of people didn't understand. And so while there is magic in this work, while this work is magical, it's not magic. There is actually something happening. And that is what I try to educate people who work with me on. I call them unconscious influences in creating their life. Because if you go into a space with horses, they're going to respond to you, whatever you are, regardless of whether you are aware of how you're impacting them. And so becoming aware, getting out of our heads and going down into our bodies is the first step. Just noticing how's our breathing, noticing where is there any tension, noticing what is actually our body's trying to tell us. And that's where the trauma healing begins, is the trauma is stuck in our bodies in kind of like a hard knot. And in order to heal from this trauma, there has to be some, the body, like I said, it's not going to go away, but it can be metabolized differently. That means absorbed by the rest of the body in a different way other than that hard knot. Well, the horses are responding to this. They can feel that hard knot. It's like a bleep on the electromagnetic field. They can feel that. And to them, they may not know what it is. All they know is that it's there. They need to decide if it's something that's aimed at them or if they should do something about it. And then they either do or don't and go back to grazing. And so that electromagnetic field is absolutely critical to become aware of. Have you guys ever heard of an organization called HeartMath?
Yes, actually, that has been coming up a lot lately.
Yeah, it is. It's a real. I think it helps people to understand that it's not this woo-woo thing. And I feel like when people do that, when people say, oh, they just know everything, these horses, da 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 da. Basically, it's a projection rather than an awareness of themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'd love the heart math. Of course, they have decades worth of research and stuff available, but a couple of
Mm-hmm.
years ago, I got one of their like the heart coherence meters, that you hook up to your pulse. And then,
Yeah, I have one of those.
man, what
Yeah.
just like a
Mm-hmm.
fascinating thing. And at that point, I had been meditating for some time, but just to be able to see it like in the technology, like on the screen, like your breath and your heart are now in coherence and you can actually feel physiologically like throughout your system, like that balance, and then bringing that into the arena, so to speak, with the horses, is quite profound for me. And it kind of just solidified a lot of things that I had been working on up until that point, but I didn't really realize what it was. So thank you for pointing that out. It's really, really good
Mm-hmm.
information. Heart math.
There was this piece of research that a woman was doing, and she had the monitors on, the heart coherence, and all of this stuff outside of the round pen. And then there was a woman sitting inside the round pen, and there was a horse at liberty. And so the horse was, looking over to the outside, not paying any attention at all to the human that was in there until her heart and breath were in coherence. And the minute that happened, the horse, you see him, he just immediately turns towards this person and walks over there to her.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. I kind of look at it like an analog radio, where when you don't have the station tuned in, there's just kind of crackling static white noise. That's kind of with the horses. But once they have a clear channel, they're there.
Yeah, and can you
And
explain a bit
you
more
have the
for our
connection.
listeners what we mean by coherence?
Basically, when everything is aligning in your heart, you're not the heart rhythm and the breathing and the blood pressure, without using all of these big terms, just align. They are in what they call flow. So, for example, if you're really agitated, that would not be very flowy. And I'm sure everybody listening to this understands when they're agitated or frustrated, it doesn't feel good. But they also know when it feels like it's flowing. And so this is a biological and a physiological process that happens when we are all aligned and feeling as though we're in balance and we are aligned. And so, go ahead.
And how does this relate to that topic that you brought up earlier called emotional agility? I think I've heard that before, but I'm not sure. Can you? And I'm getting the feeling that it has a lot to do with coherence.
Well, emotional agility, first of all, as I learned about it, comes from there's 4 steps. The first is a level of awareness. of everything in your environment. And we know that horses are really good at that because their survival has depended on it for like 55 million years in one form or another. The second step is, okay, I noticed this thing is over there. Is it aimed towards me, or it doesn't have anything to do with me? And then the third step is either responding to it or not. For example, if there's a herd of horses and a tiger who's satiated is walking through the herd, not a tiger, a lion, then they're probably going to decide that they're fine. They're aware of the satiated lion walking through, but they are also they can tell that the intention or the energy or the flow or the coherence of this lion is fine. There's not anything that's needed. So they don't scatter. But if there's one that's hungry, they're going to know what that is too, because there's a different kind of static going on in the coherence. And so that term, emotional agility, is one way to describe how horses exist in the world. And if we can, as humans, adopt this, okay, what's going on in the environment? Do I need to do something about it or not? Do it, and then just relax. The first part of that would be, if you're in heart's coherence, that means you're feeling okay. Imagine you're sitting in a cafe. And maybe it's you, Alyssa, because you're the younger one. Because I remember when I first moved to New York City, I was feeling this, although I didn't know what to do with it. Okay, I'm sitting in this cafe. I'm going to order a hamburger. I had not been off the farm. So this is a really big deal. And then there was this woman that comes in, and she sits down at my booth. Now, I was doing fine before she sat down in the booth, but then I was not in coherence with my heart rate, with my blood pressure, with anything. And she didn't necessarily look menacing. She didn't necessarily pose any kind of threat, but for me, it was something I needed to act on. So I left and, went home or to my room or whatever I did. But that was emotional agility, whether I knew it or not. I was listening to my body. And if people can learn how to do that, the body has such important information for us and how to live our lives in a coherent way. Because how many times do you see people all the time? Oh, they're frazzled, they're frustrated, they can't even sit still, or whatever reason. And then they go out to the horses and they expect the horses to do what they want. And they're not even connected to their own bodies. Their coherence is all over the place, much less connected to the horse.
Yeah, and it just seems like
the horse has
the entire majority of humanity resides in that space. I know I did for decades of my life. I mean, 2019 horses entered my life, and it wasn't until just about a little over a year ago that I really started to catch on to this stuff. And as you were breaking down the idea of emotional agility and those 3 steps, I heard awareness, discernment, and response. So, and to me, it's like,
exactly,
if we're able to be aware, and then we're able to discern what's good, bad, ugly, or in between, and then we respond to that effectively. And that's what horses are demonstrating on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. It seems so simple, and I don't understand why we humans have to make life so complicated.
Well, because of our big brains. We have this whole thing. When the reptilian brain was around, we had a very reliable way of interacting with our environment, which is through that heart's electromagnetic field. And so we sensed things. We could see things. We could pay attention. Like when I was sitting in that booth and that woman came to sit down, we could sense that something wasn't right. But then as we evolved as humans and we developed the frontal lobe and the neocortex and executive functioning and all of that, then it became this very much more complex process. We still have the same ability, innate ability to sense what's going on in our environment. We just stop paying attention to it. Because there's feelings we have in our body and there's neural pathways that go up to the brain. And then that's what makes words and, I'm going to say in quotes, meaning out of it. And so we kind of exist in that rather than putting ourselves in nature and just kind of sitting there watching the birds or whatever. We don't do that very often. We have just this consistent deluge of thoughts and information. So the first step, which is not easy, although you did say simple, Jason, is awareness. And that can only come from being in that heart coherence place.
Right. Otherwise, it seems like we are in the proverbial trap of our intellect. Is that what you're ultimately saying?
Yeah. 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 And it doesn't mean that the intellect is not needed. No, my favorite word, and you used it a while ago, is discernment. You can see everything. You can feel everything. One can do any of those things. But unless one practices discernment, then it's going to just be a whole bunch of stuff and overwhelm. And that's where people become apathetic and they become numb. There's just too much. But you can't discern very easily unless you're in connection with your body. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a beautiful point there, and I think I feel that on a personal level, but I feel like the horses have such a beautiful way of like helping us get into this state of coherence and listening and feeling our bodies rather than being stuck in our minds and with our ego rather. And it's a sense of like knowing and using our intuition.
I just think it's amazing to be able to, whether I'm on the ground or I'm under saddle, to just listen. Listen to what my body is saying. Listen to what the horse's body is saying. It's this amazing communication that's a whole different level of being in communication or connection with someone. And that, if I bring it back to coaching, life coaching, that's where I teach people or I offer this to people, how to coach from that place of connectivity where I don't know, have either one of you heard of the term intersubjectivity?
Yes.
No. Well, it's a big yes. Well, basically, it's two sentient beings sharing the same subjective state, which normally there's you and there's me and there's Alyssa. But if we're all in this cool place, we're all vibing on the same thing, so to speak, and our hearts are in coherence, then that is another, I'm going to say dimension, but it is another level of being. And from that place, people are not necessarily worried about what's going to happen because we're too busy being in the present. Can you imagine having a relationship from that place, which is what you have to be in if you're going to have a close relationship with a horse?
Yeah, and they totally blew my mind that way because when horses came into my life, I sadly, and I'll say it, I thought of them as ATVs or like a recreational vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And I quickly learned, just by my natural empathic and intuitive nature, that was totally not the way to go. And now, like we've mentioned many times before, I don't really even ride much. It's not really that much of a thing for me. I really just enjoy being with them and that sort of relationship idea. But it's mind blowing just the way, if you're open and receptive to it, how they can illuminate that in our lives. And I like, it's not magic,
Mm.
but it is alchemical. It is a transformation process. And so
Yes.
it begs the question in my
Hmm.
mind, like, do you have like a particular modality or modalities that you bring people through, be it meditation or yoga or things that you've created on your own, or do you pull from different ancient or indigenous practices? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I follow, it's very organic, but I did have to learn how to structure it and organize it, or I would not have been able to get the ICF accreditation. Um, there's three basic tenets, I think, of all of it. The first one is what we've been talking about in terms of the body being, the entire body is a sensory device, right? So this is that level, that place where awareness is keenly developed through using the rest of your body. And then once you can just begin to think about that, okay, my whole body is a sensory device. That leads to, well, okay, it's a sensory device. So what is it? Is it saying something to me? Is it in language? What am I supposed to do with all of this intake of senses and feelings? And then you go into the fact that your body is giving you sensations, registering sensations. It goes up to the brain through the amygdala, which is the emotional center, and then into the language center and meaning center. So that's where we put words on it. So especially like in trauma healing, people, so much trauma is so nonverbal. And so if we can just identify the feeling and allow ourselves with the support of, with the horses, building a safe environment is absolutely critical, psychologically safe, physically safe. So we probably spend quite a bit of time doing that first. Then people feel safe enough with my support and the others' support to feel those feelings and allow it to come out in language. And that's where my experience as a coach helps them to I could recognize their threshold for where they are and how much they can handle right now. And when they're with the horses, it's all so visceral. It's energetic, it's physical, it's everything. But they have no clue what just happened. So my job as a coach is to keep them in their bodies, see if they can own that sensation in their bodies. And depending on what they're there for, I can help them to understand what just happened and how parts of it could be helpful for them in their healing process or moving forward. And the other last part, so the first part was the body is a whole sensory device. Second is there's messages behind these sensations that can help you to understand what is happening. And you need the executive functioning, the brain, the cognitive aspect to be able to put those things together. And then the third one is this whole, we exist outside of our bodies with these heart's electromagnetic field waves that are out there. And that is at work all the time, whether we're conscious of it or not. And so to be able to understand that we actually are interacting on some level with other humans and sentient beings before we even cognitively process it through these electromagnetic fields.
Yeah, that
So
opens up
you're
so
beginning.
much. That opens up so much. So I want to unpack that a little bit, if we can. Mentioning first, you
Sure.
mentioned creating a safe environment, and you also mention our
Hmm.
senses. Well, knowing that our senses create the perception that we navigate through this life in and about, how do you help
Hmm.
people actually
Hmm.
create a safe environment? Because what's safe to me might not be safe for Alyssa, might not be safe for you, might not be safe for the next person. So can you elaborate
Hmm.
more on how you bring safety into the equation?
Well, there's a lot of different ways. One thing I'll say that is that where I suggest using the body is when we are going through. I will invite them. Maybe I'll give them a meditation to just notice what's going on in their body and ask them, okay, where are you noticing that? Where maybe I don't even say that. Maybe I just, we're talking and becoming, getting to know each other for like the first part of the session or day or whatever it is. And then as we begin to unfold, just through the process of that, just, getting into the room, I'll ask them, do you feel differently now that you've been here for 3 hours than you did when you first arrived? And they all go, yes, yes, yes. Well, what feels differently? And I'll ask them to go back into their body again. Well, I noticed that I was really tight in my chest when we first started, and now that's really relaxed. And I noticed that every time I feel, uh, well, I help them through a process that if they feel threatened or insecure or anything, I'll ask them, where do you feel that insecurity in your body? And they may say it's a knot in my stomach. They may say it's in their throat. And I ask them to, okay, where is a place on your body, in your body, where you don't feel that tightness and constriction? And it's different places. Sometimes it's people's hands. Sometimes it's their feet. Sometimes it's their heart. And so I ask them to go to that place. And so that is their safe place. They know they have one. People identify with being freaked out or insecure. They think that's just who they are. But actually, it's just part of their bodies that are experiencing that dis-ease, that incoherence. And so you're not all that. There's just part of your body that's that. So let's try to find another part of your body that feels okay. And people self-identify these places as their safety places. I don't suggest it to them. And as we go further with each experience, the opportunity to delve deeper into this awareness, level of awareness and consciousness, I often ask them, what are you feeling? How's your breathing? What's happening? And if it gets to be too much, because I can usually feel that just like the horses. And if I don't, all I have to do is watch the horses and they tell me if that person is breathing. And then I'll ask him, okay, where's your safe place? Ah, it's here. Sometimes it's a tapping that they'll do. Sometimes it is just closing their eyes, opening their eyes. It doesn't matter because it's, like you said, it's different for each individual. But the point is that they recognize that they have one within themselves that is not dependent on any external stimuli.
So, when you're working with your clients, say with the horses, do you have the horses turned out into like a paddock or something that the horses are interacting with the client?
I do it all kinds of different ways, Alyssa. One of the things that's different about what I do than one of the many things than a lot of other people is because I travel around. I mean, yes, I have this place here in Tucson, and I was just in Budapest 2 weeks ago working with people there. I go to different places where there's horses, and each place is different. sometimes they have big paddocks or corrals. Sometimes they don't let any of the horses be together. Sometimes they're an intact herd. Sometimes they have round pens, and sometimes they don't. And so I look at that and I always defer to the people whose horses they are, because they're more familiar with the horses and how they respond to everything. And then depending on the level of the people I work with, like I did this one big leadership development thing in Colorado at a ranch that I had not been to before, but there were about 50 horses and it was really big. And I did not let them go into the field. There were 20 people from Amazon and they didn't know hardly anything about horses. So I was not going to let them into the field, but I did ask them to observe and notice what they were feeling. But then after we had kind of done a little bit of that, then I could have them go in a round pen with the horse on a lead rope, which minimizes the probability of anything bad happening, and took them very clearly with me through each step of whatever experience I was doing. And then sometimes I'll work with people, like when I was in Budapest, we were on the hillside. There were horses all over the place. There was hardly any fences anywhere. And I had all the people out there. And it was beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah. So
just out of curiosity, were those horses in Budapest wild?
No, they weren't. No, they were.
Okay.
I haven't ever worked with any wild horses in this because I wouldn't know. I have to develop a relationship with the horse and go by what I'm feeling before I can ask them to do something they've never done before.
Yeah, for sure, that makes sense. And they're very in tune and have a sense to them that certain horses get along with people that may need a little extra help than others. So I hear what you're saying.
I mean, I've certainly been out in enough paddocks with horses that were, I don't know, on the BLM land or stuff like that. But that was just for me. That wasn't bringing anybody else in. And I think it's really important to get permission from the horses to do this work. They need to have as much of a say in it. Because if they are not fully present, then it diminishes the potential of the transformation, if you will. So they have to have as big trust as they have to have a great deal of trust in the process as much as the people do. And then, of course, as an equine assisted coach, I'm the one that's holding that space. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, and I've heard it talked about in the equine therapy, equine assisted learning environments by various people, and that it like comes out like the horses are doing a lot of work, and we can see that when we watch videos or whatever. We were just watching one this morning of this I guess the horse owner's husband went out in this paddock with the 3 horses, and they were just standing around his face, just like absorbing his energy and like helping him out. And so they do a lot of work energetically, and it's really important to acknowledge that. So I appreciate the fact that you actually bring that to the surface, and it's not just like we're going in and doing all this work with the horses and asking so much from them energetically, and then just kind of, okay, thank you. But
I probably am more conservative and safety conscious around the horses than I am around the people. Because I know how much this takes. And then I also do energy work, different modalities on the horses to clear them after we work together. so that they can get rid of other people's cooties so they can be clear. And because it does take a toll. I remember one time, not too long ago, here in Tucson, and I had a young girl as a client. And I call young girl, but Alyssa, you're a young woman. So she was your age. And she had been going through some really tough stuff. I mean, this was an intense session, and I had her out in my round pen with my one of my horses, and he was so present for her. He was so present for her. And then afterwards, I had planned on riding just because that was the time when I was going to ride. He couldn't keep that was too much for him. And I never did that again, ask him to do that kind of work. I didn't think it was going to be that heavy. And then ask him to take me around on his back. That was just too much for him.
Yeah, that makes total sense. These horses, they're like walking energy. I don't even know. They absorb so much from us, and it's fascinating that after that session you noticed in him, like you heard him tell you that it was too much for you to ride him. I'm curious about how he expressed this to you during and after the session, like what his feelings were.
Well, during the session, the young woman that I'm talking about had extreme abuse, parental abuse, specifically from her father. And so, and my horse, when she was working with, is a gelding, and he just almost had himself wrapped around her. She was really tiny, and he was just the presence of protecting. I mean, he was so totally gentle, but so totally, I'm going to stay here and I'm not going to move. So no matter what you do, and no matter how you feel, and no matter what you're thinking about yourself or any of that, I will not leave. That was huge, because if you can imagine how their sensitivity is so their sensitivity is so huge. I was trying to think of a better word. Sophisticated, yes. Their ability to feel is so sophisticated and heightened. Can you imagine what it felt like for him to hold that space for her when everything about it would tell him, you've got to get out of here. This isn't okay. But for him to have that discernment that because they are herd animals. This is what they do for each other. They are co-regulating with each other all the time. And so they would never, the difference between, I think, what I have observed over the last 20 years between human society and horses is that horses act, live, behave for the greater good of the entire herd. Humans act individually. It's like we pretend that we're not all one herd. And so that's why it comes so naturally for them. If a human in that energetic feeling is such that it is in need of regulating, then they will be there to do that. And that's what he did. So his behavior was very, his movement was minimal, but he was not going to move. And this went on for probably an hour. And then afterwards, I changed my clothes, got some to drink, whatever. And then I went out and saddled him up. And he'd just given it all. he was like, okay, yeah, because he was a horse who wants to please. But he couldn't intellectually, energetically. He, like his gaits weren't even. He couldn't. He couldn't manage anything. He just was very distracted and not there. And so I just, we just went for a walk. We just went for a hack. It was the only thing left to do. And and then I'd had to do some energy clearing afterwards.
Wow. There's a lot. There's a lot in that. There's such incredibly intuitive beings, and being able to experience and share the space with them in a way that they help us heal. And I that's we could go down an entire rabbit hole of that, but man, such a beautiful, powerful experience. And the way that this horse, like, I mean, you mentioned he loves to please, but the way that he chose to be there and help this young woman, and then he was very clear to you about what he was capable and willing to do after. It's like, that's just so beautiful.
Can you share more about the energy work that you do?
Yeah. I am a Reiki master, and I've studied with different people and who are just masters at what they do in terms energetically. There's a woman in New York, just different kinds. There's lots of different energy modalities. Mostly mine. I just kind of put together everything. And some of it is hands-on. Some of it is at a distance. Some of it I use essential oils. I do some myofascial work. Sometimes I work on the chakras and balancing those. And it's talk about an intuitive process. First of all, I ask the horse, okay, I want to give you a gift here. Are you up to it? And they're very clear. Yes, no. They're very, very clear. And so I'll start with balancing the chakras, and I do that by putting hands on. And sometimes there's a counterclockwise motion. There's some other little modalities that I do with my hands. And then there's also these things called fuses, FUSES, and they're different kind of like acupressure points that are connected to meridians. And so if I address those, like there's an emotional fuse that usually is pretty clogged after one of these sessions. And there's also a physical, an intellectual, the the sacrum is all about belonging and feeling safe. And so it's easy. Excuse me. It's easy to, as I put my hands on them, identify where they're stuck, just because my hands will tell me. And that's the Reiki stuff. And it's all about listening and paying attention, just like I said in the very beginning. And it's amazing the worlds that it opens up if I allow myself to let go of what I think I'm seeing.
Wow, that's incredible. Energy work is such a fascinating topic to me, and the way that the horses respond to it is often adorable and quite magical. As we begin to close up, I've got a question. How do you like to reinforce your horses?
Hmm. I reinforce them by listening to them for what they want and need. And I feel like sometimes we're going to have you decide, and sometimes I get to decide, and sometimes we're creating together. So, just recognizing, acknowledging, and honoring who he is. And paying attention to it. That's how I reinforce.
That's great. And Lisa, where can people find you? And of course, we'll put links to all your social media and websites and stuff. But if you want to give a verbal shout out, how can people get in touch?
Yeah, it's equinealchemy.com. And my email is lisa@equinealchemy.com. I have, when you look there, there's a calendar of all the different stuff that I am putting out there. And I do try to jump into the social media just so people can have an opportunity to see this work. That's what's so wonderful about horses. You don't have to go worrying about photos. They're just where they are, and they're always so beautiful. And I'm here in Tucson, Arizona. I will be doing a workshop up in Victor, Idaho, which is just about half an hour or so outside of Jackson Hole in August. And I will be doing a workshop in Atlanta, outside of Atlanta, the end of June. And then, of course, the Moving Beyond Your Limiting Beliefs is the one June 1st through 3rd. And then then there's a whole bunch of stuff in the fall. So come and see and reach out to me. Send me an email. Give me a call. As you can tell, over the last time we've been here together, I do like talking about horses.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. Do you have any last parting words of wisdom for our listeners?
Oh, just listen to your own wisdom. You have it.
Oh, that's a profound closing statement right there. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you.
Lisa, it's been an incredible time with you and hearing about your story. And I look forward to, hopefully in the near future, attending one of your events. Sounds
that
like
would be so fun. Yeah, it is. It's transformational without a doubt. What do I say? Transformation is not an option. It just happens.
Oh my goodness. And the profoundness just keeps flowing. It's beautiful.
Thank you, Alyssa and Jason. It has just really been a pleasure. It's always wonderful to connect with people who are like-hearted and like-minded. And I appreciate both of you.
Oh, thank you. The feeling's definitely mutual. We understand, and we're happy to have you here and sharing this time with us.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Now we'll have to do a trade. You'll have to come over and be on my podcast too. So we'll figure that out.
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
All righty. Take care, everyone. Thank you.